Okay, for this assignment, you guys have 3 problems per number, and more so you have like a square root, and it is not a perfect square root. It is a irrational number. So square root of 85, there's nothing that I can multiply times itself that'll give me exactly the number 85. Same thing for the square root of 10 and the square root of 220. So you do have to remember, I'll actually do this one. This one is not on your assignment, but we have the square root of 50. And we know that there is no perfect square for the square root of 50. Okay, this is where we use our knowledge of perfect squares. And so I know that 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9. If you down, but if you notice, we have the square root of 50. So with the square root of 50, I just need to find out where it would fall into. So all of these perfect squares I could work with backwards. So the square root of 4 then equals 2. The square root of 9 equals 3. Let me see if I can. Okay, so then the square root of 16 would be 4. Square root of 25 would be 5. Square root of 36 would be 6. Square root of 49 would be 7. Square root of 64 would be 8. And that's exactly what a square root means. So if we're talking about like just a normal number line, we would first have, so I've kind of already identified on my own that the square root of 50 would be between the square root of 49 and the square root of 64. So if we were going to do a number line with just square roots, it would look something like this, where we have the square root of 49. Okay, and obviously that turned out to be a much larger square root than I intended, but now it's going to be easy to see if I wanted to highlight my perfect squares. That's the square root of 49, because we just said that is a perfect square. It comes from squaring 7. And then the square root of 64, that's my other perfect square because it comes from squaring 8. And so what we're saying is that the square root of 50 is somewhere between the square root of 49 and the square root of 64. Now, if you look at my number line, or my list of numbers, I should say, it's very easy to see where it's at. But if you could just name these things, then we already know half of the information. The square root of 49 is 7, and the square root of 64 is 8. So we know the square root of 50 is somewhere between 7 and 8. We don't care if it's closer to 7 or closer to 8 at this moment. We just know it's between those two numbers. So here's number 1. It says it is between 25 and 26. That is a lie, because 25 squared equals a really big number. It's 625, which means, and then 26 times 26 would be 676, which would then mean that the square root of 50 is between the square root of 625 and the square root of 676, which is not true because the square root of 50 doesn't flow in that order. Okay, next one. So in this case, if I had told you like the square root of 50 is, because this one is a slightly different problem, if I told you the square root of 50 would be right here, well, according to like my list of numbers, the square root of 50 should be really, really close to the square root of 49, which is actually 7. So this is where it would actually need to be. So you would say lie, because square root of 50 is closer to 7 and not 8. Okay, and then so like over here, if I told you like it's approximately 7.75, you would, for the same reason, say that that's a lie. But if I said it was somewhere over here, now you have to understand this part right here is somewhere between 7 and 7.5. If I told you 7.2, that's a pretty okay approximation. If I told you 7.1, that might be even a better approximation, but it's still close. Anywhere between 7.1 all the way to like 7.4 maybe, and 4 is really like a stretch. I would probably say like 7.3 I would take as like the truth answer, because it's definitely somewhere in there. If you do 7.5, it's nowhere near the middle. And if you do anything past that, it's nowhere near 8. So you have to keep that in mind. Because some of you are just typing this into the calculator, which is an okay way to check your answer. But if you just type it into the calculator, you're not really thinking about where it's actually closer to. Which, like, when I write them all down, it's very clear to see that 50 is only 1 away from 49. Which is what we did in quarter 1, where we would do, like, from 7 to 8, square root of 50, and we would say like, oh, how far is the square root of 50 from the square root of 49 and the square root of 64? Well, it's only 1 away here, and over here it's like 14 away, so then you knew it had to be somewhere over here. Okay, so it's not completely different, and I apologize for making this video super long, but I just wanted to do it real quick so you guys had something to look at, which means I didn't prepare to make it shorter. But any questions, comments, concerns, make sure you let me know. Text me to that number. That's probably the easiest way to reach me. Right now my Chavez Goldsmith email is actually not working, so yeah, use the phone number.